Hello everybody, welcome to History Made Awesome. My name is Eric, and today we're doing a reaction video to Victoria Season 3, Episode 1, and not just any reaction, but a historical reaction from a history's perspective. And before I go into that, I just want to introduce all you guys to a special guest making a special appearance, and I'll show it to you right now. It is Napoleon himself. So he'll be doing a small reaction for us. And yeah, Napoleon, did you like this? Did you like it? I think he says yes. So yeah, so we'll be getting down with our reactions to it. I'll see you guys in a little bit. Okay guys, so as I said before, we are doing a Victoria Season 3 reaction from a history perspective, or more from my perspective as an historian. And the reason why I'm reacting to Season 3 Episode 1 is because this season, and in this episode, it touches on a lot of things that I find interesting in history, and it's something that I kind of study as an historian a little bit, which is nationalism and liberalism, things of that nature. While my form of area study is more like 30 or Napoleonic Wars time era, I really do enjoy anything that kind of goes along with that idea of nationalism and liberalism and things of that nature, which were some of the things that are being tackled in this season of Victoria. And so just in general, give a little overview of what Victoria is. It is a British television show that follows the life of Queen Victoria. Right, I think it started during her reign in 1835, I believe. I don't have the current date in front of me, but I'll put it at it. And it pretty much follows her life's tribulations that kind of happened during her time as queen. And also, it also touches on different things that were kind of going on around her reign. So earlier in the seasons, they're talking on one of the big things being the potato crisis that was happening in Ireland. And a bunch of other things that are kind of going on around that time. And in this season, it tries to tackle the bunch of the revolutions that are occurring around this time, because literally the first episode the first scene literally is the French Revolution that happened in 1848 against Louis Philippe and the July Monarchy. And that part of that scene really sets off where this episode and where this season is going to definitely go. And from an entertaining perspective, Victoria is a show in general. And I guess this can kind of touch into the first episode of Season 3. It is actually very entertaining. The actors do a very, very good job. The woman who plays Queen Victoria, I forget her name. She does a very brilliant job. I think she's actually a well-known actress, to be fair. So yeah, so all the actors do a fantabulous job with them. The writing is very good. It actually keeps me interested, which is very good for for the type of show that it is. It keeps me very intrigued into it. But yeah, I enjoy the show immensely. I enjoy, the production is amazing. I think it really does bring you into that time period in a very nice way. And now we're to look at the show from a history perspective. The show from a history perspective is actually pretty good. I would be surprised if I was surprised that it actually touched on interesting things. One of the things that kind of touched home for me was the story of Sarah Forbes Benetta. I don't know which episode she was in. I was trying to find it, but I couldn't find it. That is one of the episodes that came to me, and I said, wow, this show is actually historically accurate. And the one thing that kind of got me, I guess I want to say off the show in a sense, or I was like, I don't think that would have happened, is Victoria and her interest with Lord Melbourne. There we go. So the relationship that she has with Lord Melbourne in the show is a little bit suspect, but according to the showrunners and I think the people who helped write the show, supposedly in the diary, well, just to kind of get a little bit more insight, people think that kind of relationship really didn't happen because kind of people who don't know, Lord Melbourne is the Prime Minister during her first reign, and they have a little relationship going back and forth. I won't say love, but deep respect and mutual appreciation for each other. And I think the show goes a little bit farther than that. But people are saying that there's no record evidence of that type of thing occurring. But then I believe in her diary, or at least in Victoria's diary, there's a lot of talk about Lord Melbourne in interesting ways. And then also, supposedly, as one of Victoria's children, Victoria asked her to, throughout the diary, to kind of blank things out that she doesn't want to be put out in the open. And then the biggest one I would have to say is Ernest or at least Ernest II, which is Albert's brother, and his relationship with, I think, the Duchess of Sunderland, I believe. I'll put in the edit too. But there's a relationship that person has with a character which definitely did not happen. Except for those small little minor things, the show actually gets a lot of history correct. And now let's jump into this episode of season 3. Generally, the show, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I was hooked on it for the 55 minutes that it went on for. It pretty much kept the same type of quality that the rest of the seasons have been going on. And as I said before, this season touches on things that I find really interesting. So I think, since we're there, we should just jump into the subject. So in general, this episode gets a lot of things historically correct. There are some minor things that are kind of don't really hurt the show historically accuracy level, I guess, but they are historically incorrect. So let's just jump into the things it does get right. And I think the thing it does get right is the general apprehension by the higher classes within Europe, especially the ruling classes within Europe, being especially rich, and the monarchies that dotted Europe during this time. There was a lot of apprehension after the Revolution of 1848, basically like with all these revolutions spreading throughout all of Europe, and in the show, England in specific, there's a lot of apprehension. Will this revolutions that are occurring around Europe kind of lead to the 1789, the guillotines and things of that nature. So that's something that the show does get positively correct, especially since this show it jumps around to different locations, to where you're at the palace, Buckingham Palace, where all the where the Queen's at, and a lot of the higher stratas of society are at. And also jumps to the lower class to kind of give you this idea of like, this is what's going on in this setting. And then also what they do kind of well is they kind of allow those characters who are in the palace to go and see what is going on. To what extent that happened a lot, I am not totally sure, but I think it happened a little bit. And then Prince Albert's really that person who kind of, at least in this episode, kind of brings that perspective to the viewers. And then also what this episode also does, also introduces interesting new characters. I don't know the person's name. I think her name's Abigail. She was, if you guys looked at the intro, you guys would have saw I chose her one of my favorite scenes of the episode. I really like her as a character. But what was I saying? Oh, so, I think that's something that this episode really does portray very well. Now, there are some other interesting things I think the show also does very well, and I think, as I said before, I think that's one of the things of the show. It shows you parts of history they didn't think happened. And then this episode specifically, a man by the name of Kufe, he is one of the Charlist leaders in the show, and he actually did exist, and he was actually mixed race. So have a black man portray that character was actually historically correct, which I was very surprised to find. Supposedly he was a mixed race son of Gillingham, Kent woman, of Anglo-Saxon origin. Julian Fox was the person's name, and a man of African heritage. And I guess he became I think he worked in a tailor. So he was a tailor, and then that's how he kind of started his trade. And then I think the show actually presents the fact that he was a more I guess extremist member of the Charlist movement. But the scene that he kind of led in the last part didn't happen. Well, yeah, so there's no historical record of it happening. There was a big mass movement. Not movement, but there was a mass meeting. It was called if I can find it, what it was called the mass meeting at Kensington Common, which happened on April 10th, 1848. There was fear that that movement could have led to what happened in the last scene occur, but that event didn't happen. And also attached to that last scene is what Queen Victoria is going through, and it kind of carries through into the next episode. And so only thing I can find to what could have happened is a letter that was written by Albert himself, in 1848, the May 6th. This is before they left Buckingham Palace because of what was occurring. And so I think I will spoil it for you guys. If you don't want me to spoil it, then don't listen to this part. But basically, anything close to what happened to riot or anything like that. And if you guys seen the trailer, you guys, I think you guys kind of know what's happening already. This was what the prince said to Baron Stockmar. He says, "We have Charlist movements every night, which results in numbers of broken heads. The organizations of these people is incredible. They have secret signals and correspond from town to town by means of carrier pigeons. In London, they are 10,000 to 20,000 strong, which is not much out of a population of 2 million. But if they could, by means of their organization, throw themselves in a body upon one point, they might be successful in a coup de main," which is like a surprise attack, essentially. And then he goes on to say, "Up to this time, they have dealt with only through the police, and if possible to keep them in check without military force, the troops will certainly not be allowed to come into conflict with them. The load to the country on a whole is besides very great. It is impossible so far as the person of the sovereign is concerned that this should ever be greater." So, the only thing I kind of have with, in the show, they're really concerned that it could have occurred, and also, historically wise, they were very concerned that it could have happened. As the government in general, they had actually deployed, during that meeting of the Commons, or the, if I can find it, it was called the Kensington Common meeting, they had actually deployed lots of police in the area, and they also deployed troops if they were to cross the River Thames, and to go, I think, to go to Parliament itself, and yeah. So, in general, I think the show captures the general, weariness of what was going on within Europe. But the violent event that occurs at the end of the show didn't happen. But what I would say is those things did happen around England, like in Manchester or these cities where they're really industrialized or heavily textile manufacturing areas. Those things did occur in those areas, but didn't happen in Buckingham Palace. Another thing the show kind of does provide, which I do enjoy a lot, is it kind of provides a little bit of a taste of what happened and why these revolutions occurred. It can't really focus on France because its locale of the show doesn't show it there. But in England, it does provide some form of reasons why. Now, I will say that not all these reasons are portrayed in this episode, but they were kind of teased throughout the earlier seasons, especially the Charlist movement and other forms like that. And to kind of give an idea of how that show provides the reasons for why the Charlist movement became a big thing, I think it's also good to kind of show why the revolution occurred in France in general, and then why it spread throughout the rest of Europe. So the source I have for this is a book by Tyler Stovall, who I believe is he's a professor at University of California, Santa Cruz. He's the author of Paris and the Spirit of 1919, and yeah. So he writes this book called Transnational France: The Modern History of a Universal Nation. And so in this book, he provides a really good lowdown of why the revolution occurred in France. I won't read you the entire book, of course, but I'll read you some interesting passages that kind of lead to this. So after the July Monarchy, which happened in 1832, I can do that really quick. So the July Monarchy began in 1830, and what was kind of spawned from that was it was basically like a constitutional monarchy, but the difference with this constitutional monarchy is that it was a very, very liberal constitution, and what that led to was a very liberal economic plan it was very laissez-faire in a sense, which allowed for a lot of people who had money to get more money and to attain more influence, and the people who could only vote are those people who had lots of money. And so there was a couple of things that happened around the 1840s and then eventually in 1848 that allowed for this to happen. And so I'll give you the lowdown what Tyler says. So like I said before, there was already a sense of, it began with Guizot, who was the prime minister at the time. He allowed for those liberal economic policies to continue. And around the 1840s, there's difficult circumstances I'm about to tell you about. And to make things worse, to respond to these things, He would shut down a lot of people trying to gather and talk about these things, especially like the middle class who didn't have the rights, were becoming a very important part of French society at this time. So Tyler goes on to say things took a turn for the worse with a massive economic crisis of the mid-1840s, known as the Hungry Forties in Britain. Hard times ravaged Europe. The harvest was poor in 1845 and worse in 1846, when a major disease struck potatoes, a traditional staple of the poor. The potato shortage brought hunger across France and throughout Europe, most notably causing the Great Famine in Ireland. These hard times in agriculture were followed by an industrial crisis in 1847, as an overinvestment and speculation in the railroads produced a short-term economic collapse. So interestingly enough, the show itself does provide intricacies of these events occurring. Like I said before, they do touch on the potato famine that happened in Ireland. And interestingly enough, this over speculation of railroads can actually be seen in one scene. I don't have the episode. I won't play the scene, but actually no, I will play the scene. Here's the scene.
Mr. Penge?
You know what this means, Brodie?
I suspect you're going to tell us, Mr. Penge.
It means Cornelius Penge, Esquire, gentleman.
I wouldn't offer your resignation here yet. I heard some of the railway shares have been overvalued.
Not the Leeds Thirsk Railway. That will run like a silver ribbon across the Pennines. Still up?
I can't sleep.
At least you are not contemplating the ruin of your life's hopes.
What do you mean?
I did not profit from railway fever. The Leeds and Thirsk Railway Company is no more, and with it have gone my savings and any dream I may have had of becoming a gentleman.
So in that scene, one of the characters of the show is he's actually, throughout the show, he was saying he was trying to get rich on railroads, and it turned out that his investment fell through. And so those types of things happen, those economic things happen, but like in all throughout Europe and in large amounts of money, more than just as one person. So the show does provide it, but maybe not in the most fullest light. And then also the show itself, the episode itself shows Albert walking through the more poor classes of London and shows how they're living and how things are very bad. And also the same light also touched on Karl Marx, and he's actually someone is mentioned quite a lot through the episode, which is kind of cool to see, is that that the show has this understanding of the time period. But I think one thing I also want to do is provide how this kind of touched on Europe, and then this is how kind of end this recording. I mean, so again, the show kind of mentions all these different revolutions occurring, which is really correct that all these things are occurring and there's lots of bad things happening. And so Tyler goes on to say there's different types of bad things occurring. You know, monarchies who are being destroyed. There are kings who are there's kings who have to kind of give in to some of these demands, like making more liberal constitutions and more rights for more people, things of that nature. And I think this is the most interesting thing, and I'll end with this. France thus served as the global model of liberty in 1848, but those who followed the French example had their own ideas of what liberty meant. Insurgents in Germany and Italy crafted a model of national liberation, linking social and political reforms to the struggle of national independence. Hungarians fought for freedom from the control of the Austrian Empire, while at the same time resisting demands for the liberation of Serbs, Croats, Czechs, and Romanians within Hungary. The Frankfurt Parliament wished above all to unify Germany as a constitutional monarchy, offering the imperial throne to the Prussian king in 1849. National liberation, in a large part from the European resistance, the idea of national liberation derived in large part from the European resistance movements against Napoleon, but this time the enemies were the reactionary empires of Central and Eastern Europe. So it's interesting to note that the Chartist movement was also affected by these ideas, even though we can perceive that would not have been the case. At the same time, I think it's also interesting to note that Napoleon and his Napoleonic Wars also helped impregnate Europe with these ideals and allowed for these revolutions to occur. So in a sense, Napoleon kind of did win, I guess. unless that was his thing. So those are some things that I will be talking about in the next video that will definitely be coming out soon, which will look at the Napoleonic Wars and its effects on Europe. And this is something that we'll definitely be talking about as a lasting effect that was put on Europe, and it's something that is being portrayed in a great television show like Victoria. So I hope you guys enjoyed our reactions to it. If you guys agree with my comments or disagree, hit me up in the comment section. And me and Napoleon, we'll see you guys later. Say bye, people. Say bye to people, Napoleon. Bye, guys. See you guys later. If you guys liked it, please subscribe. Do all those things. And peace.